seated. Let us pray. Dear author of life and time, we gather in the uplift of a new year, filled with good feelings for one another, in a town that's growing and optimistic. Help us lead with humility and a firm eye on the larger good. Amen. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as distributed by our city clerk, Carla Geyer?
Motion to approve.
Second? Motion second, council discussion. All in favor signify with yes.
Yes.
Opposed with no, unanimously approved. Is there a motion to approve the December 18th and 19th work session minutes and the December 21st regular meeting minutes, also as distributed by our city clerk?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second, council discussion. All in favor signify with yes.
Yes.
Opposed with no, unanimously approved. Allow me to read the Big Brothers, Big Sisters proclamation establishing January as Mentoring Month. Whereas National Mentoring Month is a time we honor the caring individuals across the city of Waverly who are committed to helping the next generation of Americans reach their full potential. Whereas a mentor is a caring, consistent presence who devotes time to a young person to help that young person discover personal strength and achieve their potential through a structured and trusting relationship. And whereas quality mentoring encourages positive choices, promotes self-esteem, supports academic achievement, and introduces young people to new ideas, whereas mentoring programs have shown to be effective in combating school violence and discipline problems, substance abuse, incarceration, and truancy, and whereas research shows that young people who are at risk for not completing high school but who had a mentor are 55% more likely to be enrolled in college, 81% more likely to report participating regularly in sports or extracurricular activities, more than twice as likely to say they had a leadership position in a club or sports team, and 78% more likely to volunteer regularly in their communities. And whereas youth development experts agree that mentoring is critical to the social, emotional, and cognitive development of youth, helping them navigate the path to adulthood more successfully, whereas mentors help young people set career goals and use their personal contacts to help young people meet industry professionals and find jobs, and whereas all of the above listed benefits serve to link youth to economic opportunity while also strengthening the fiber of our communities, whereas despite these benefits, 1 in 3 youth will reach age 19 without a mentor, constituting a mentoring gap that demonstrates a need for collaboration and resources, whereas the City of Waverly appreciates the contributions of all those who serve as mentors, Big Brothers, Big Sisters of Northeast Iowa, for bringing your certified one-to-one mentoring program to the City of Waverly for all to benefit. Now, therefore, I, Charles D. Enfelt, Mayor of the City of Waverly, Iowa, do hereby declare the City of Waverly, January 2016, as Mentoring Month, and call upon public officials, business and community leaders, educators, and encourage all Waverly citizens to observe this month with appropriate ceremonies, activities, and programs. Is there a motion?
I move we proclaim January as Mentoring Month, sponsored by Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Northeast Iowa.
Thank you. Second, please.
Second.
Council discussion. It's a great program. I went to the breakfast they had. That was a lot of us here. So, great program. All in favor signify with yes.
Yes.
Opposed with no, unanimously approved. At this time, we'd like to ask it almost feels like Chris Neindorf lost his way. He's in the back of the room. He almost should be up here. So I'm going to correct that halfway. Chris, if you could come up here, and I'm going to present you with the plaque, and any of the council people who would like to stand behind Chris, I think you're welcome. This is an important moment to honor a little bit.
I was made a motion before. I was so used to it.
The city of Waverly appreciates the dedicated service of Chris Nondor as 4th Ward Councilman, November 21st, 2011 to December 31st, 2015. We'll also say that we've had a tremendous growth of the town. 2 years, how many years you had? You served for 4 years. And we've grown, and a lot of it's because of your care for everybody on the council, care for the issues, study the issues, your conscientiousness. And so there's a united council dealing with this plaque must be treasured. One more thing. It is important that public service have a special sense of appreciation. It's a feeling when we're honoring you with this plaque that is truly we the people. Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
That's
Back be quiet now.
Or you can leave if you want. You don't have to stay now, Chris.
Our guest council person for the month of January is Tony Michael. It's great to have you with us. There's something very special about our guest council people. You have full voice at any time that you'd like to speak on any issue. Maybe not a vote, but you got a voice, and that's what's really important around here. Maybe you could introduce yourself to people who don't quite know you.
Yeah, so I'm pretty new to Waverly. We've only been here about 4 years. We moved here from Colorado about 4 years ago now. I've got 2 kids, so I've got 2 daughters that are 2 and 6. And I'm a licensed mental health counselor in the area. I work over in Cedar Falls, and I'm a registered play therapist. So that's what I do for a living. We had the choice of any community that we wanted to live in Iowa when we moved back to Iowa, and we picked Waverly. So we interviewed a lot of different towns and ended up choosing this one. So.
Wow, that's a privilege, and yeah, it's a great field. And I'm sure you appreciate the Big Brothers, Big Sisters month that we're in, and you're part of that month.
Definitely do.
Yeah, for mental health. Thank you. Play specialist. Thank you. This is the date, time, and place for a public hearing to amend the zoning ordinance of the old junior high building from R1 residential, R4 residential, to commercial. City Clerk, do we have any written?
No, we do not, Your Honor.
Okay. Public oral comments are now in order. Who would like to speak on this?
Dwayne Little Waverly. I think we're pretty fortunate that a citizen or a developer stepped forward to take over that building because it had the potential of becoming a real problem for Waverly. And they haven't asked for $1 of incentives or tax breaks or nothing to do this. So we should be fairly grateful to the owners of the building for their work and their foresight and their ability to see kind of a diamond in the rough to them. And in the process, Waverly is gaining something.
Thank you. Wonderful words. Any other public comments? Hearing none, we close the public hearing. Formal motion, please.
I move second reading of ordinance 1008, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance of Waverly, Iowa, providing for rezoning of property from multifamily residential district R4 to commercial district C3 located at 350 First Avenue Northwest.
Second.
Second.
Motion second, council discussion. A roll call vote, please.
Resnichek.
Yes.
Waldstein.
Yes.
Lampy.
Yes.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Scher.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Unanimously approved, ordinance 1008. At this time, I'd invite any comments, any items that are not on tonight's agenda from from the public?
Dwayne Little Waverly. Got 3 questions. One of them is it seems like we have an awful lot of contracts going towards WHKS. We have some tonight that are beyond on the agenda. We've had kind of a series of contracts that keep going to WHKS. I'm kind of curious as to why they seem to be the only contractor or consultant or engineer that we're dealing with. Second question is the status of the Mid-America moving the gas main on the Green Bridge, so that when we get a report back, I think next meeting, we'll have the ability to go forward with that and get that project moving again. It seems to be stalled. Third question is the status of the sewage backup that happened or is happening up on 4th Street northeast, I believe,
Right.
north of 2nd Avenue. And how many homes are affected by that up there?
Okay. Do you want to start with the ones that belong to the city attorney? And any responses on any of this?
Don't think there is one, is there, for me?
What?
I don't think there was one for me, was there?
No, maybe not. Mike, then you can take the northeast question.
Over the weekend, we were notified of a sanitary sewer backup, and this backup was caused due to fiber optic conduit that was bored in and went right through one of our sanitary sewer mains. So that issue is being resolved.
Any other responses to any of Dwayne's questions? Pardon me? You know, Brian?
At this time, I believe we're aware of only one.
Good. That's good. Okay. With
Do we want to answer the WHKS question? I mean,
yeah, I don't know. Okay.
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
I mean, I either say we're not going to answer it or answer it.
That Bill, you want WHK?
I'll address that. We employ probably half a dozen consulting firms throughout the year at any given time. They're by no means the only one, and I believe they've only got one active project going on right now, and that's the Dry Run Creek.
I didn't see one on the agenda tonight unless I overlooked it.
Make sure you speak into the mic, Edie.
I just said
Yeah.
to Dwayne's comment, he said there was one on our agenda tonight for payment, but I don't think I see one.
They're part of the 16th Street reconstruction.
Okay.
They're part of the 16th Street construction as well.
16th Street.
Plus, we have one out there for, analysis of what the Green Bridge.
Oh, excuse me. 16th Street, the design's done, so their contract is basically done. But yes, I stand corrected. We have the 3rd Street Southeast Bridge.
Yeah, that I was aware of, yeah.
I think the answer also is that we're very pleased with their professionalism and their width of expertise. They give me more confidence than a lot of other people. So I thank them for being active in Iowa and being popular, and we're with them as well when we need to be. We have 4 items on tonight's consent calendar. They are a pay request from McClure Engineering for the airport runway. We have Bergen KDV communication system for the public service center work. We have a wine permit to Teat Nursery. We have a liquor license to Big Bend Poorhouse. Is there a motion?
I move approval of the consent calendar.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motioned and seconded. All in favor signify with yes.
Yes.
Opposed with no, unanimously approved. Regular business item number 1 is to pave 16th Street Southwest from near 4th Avenue to Meadowview Lane. City engineer, for the public, a little background information would be helpful. And I think this also has federal money attached to it, which is a nice thing. Background, this is for also as he prepares here, this is the street by the high school that connects a lot of the traffic going south to 10th Street. I said too much. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
I mean, we can make this as long or short as you want. So if it's helpful, I can, on the overhead, I can throw up a map showing the area. It's in your packet.
Yeah, I think
If you have it.
since we have 3 items on this, it'd be fine. Yes.
Our IT guy from the back row.
Okay, we're going low tech tonight. So, yeah, this is reconstruction of 16th Street, south of 4th Avenue. So right at the intersection there is the high school or school administration building. And we're going to preserve the majority of the curb and gutter, core out, replace with full depth asphalt pavement, the section in between down to Meadowview Lane. The estimated cost of this project, with everything included, is about $440,000, of which we have $200,000 in federal aid. The remaining funds will come from the local option sales tax.
The pictures were taken at night.
About visual presenter, it's on. Is the bulb burned out? I mean, is it?
May have to move without it. That's okay.
We'll improvise.
Any questions of Mike before we go to motion?
I guess, and just as, because we've got 3 of them here, one question I have on the project is the access to the Rolling Meadows apartments. How is that going to be handled, since their access currently is only off of 16th, and that's going to be part that's going to be under the reconstruction? Yep, they have 2 entrances, so when we get into doing the base work, the excavation and sub-base, we will stage it and kind of draw the dividing line in between the 2 driveways. A few years ago when we did the north portion of this, we did the same thing with the school administration building and parking lot. So we, as much as we can within reason, will stage the work to minimize the impact. There certainly will be more impact when we get into the actual paving operation, but we have really pretty good coordination with the property owners and keep them informed as to what to expect and when to expect it.
Thank you.
I wonder, maybe, I guess if you can't show pictures, maybe describe a little bit. I'm a little bit confused of the need. I guess maybe describe the condition of the street or the need to replace the street. As I guess as I drive through there or whatever, it looks pretty good. So I guess from a priority standpoint compared to other streets and so forth.
So going back to around 1997, we began rebuilding the entire collector street system in town. And we targeted the roads in front of the school systems first. They were heavily used, highly visible, and would be able to show great benefit and to the community. And so we've worked our way around the community over the last 18 years. And so we certainly went after the ones that were in greater need. They have to be, in order to use federal dollars, they have to be a designated collector street. And we've really done a pretty good job of rebuilding the system. If you were to project out, we have 4 more projects identified that are collector streets and eligible for federal funding. We used to have enough federal dollars within the region that Waverly was doing a project every year. That has since changed. We are down to only having enough money regionally for Waverly to do a federal aid project about every 3rd year. Again, we're down to probably 4 remaining projects identified. These roads are in better condition and in a more residential type setting. So as we go forward in looking at identifying the next roadway to seek federal funds to go after, we're probably going to start doing resurfacing projects as opposed to reconstruction projects. They've already programmed money for federal year 17, 18, and 19. So our next opportunity for Waverly to get federal funds will not be until federal fiscal year 2020.
Okay, so but I guess the last statement, so this would be the last project that we get federal funds until 2020.
Right, and it will it may be the last reconstruction project that we utilize those funds for, and we'll start doing resurfacing projects. So, for instance, Business 218 going out towards the airport is one. Horton Road, Bremer Road, those are resurfacing projects that were done back around 1998, 99.
I guess my only question is from a priority standpoint and a budget standpoint, as we're waiting for information back for the Green Bridge, I guess in my mind it seems, I guess I would look for a way to delay projects until we have a better idea what the Green Bridge is going to impact us or how that'll impact us. Would it be possible to do that? In my mind, the Green Bridge, we've got we're impacting thousands of people a day, and it seems like that would be a priority at this time.
That's what you want to do.
But what of these monies could be used for that?
Could you transfer that money into a fund that could be used for the Green Bridge?
This is 11th hour. I want to go back to the calendar of actions that the council's already taken regarding this project. And back on August 17th, we entered into an agreement for professional services. On October 5th, we approved the Iowa DOT federal aid funding agreement. So those were actions taken by the council to set in motion this project.
I understand that. I'm just trying to follow up on Dave's question in the sense of, even if some of us or all of us were of the same opinion as Dave, would that kind of transference of funds even be possible?
It depends on what the council wants to do with the 3rd Street Southeast Bridge.
But would that money be able to be transferred into being used for the Green Bridge project?
The local option
Should we
sales,
decide?
the local option sales tax, yes. The federal aid, maybe not. Depends on what you want to do to the bridge.
I don't think we know what we're going to want to do with the bridge yet, obviously. But
What do we miss or lose by not continuing the process that you're right, that we have started through the application process and approving that, as you've pointed out in the calendar? What would be the downside to delaying this? What would we lose?
I'm not prepared to answer that question tonight. If you want to, this is in the DOT pipeline to be bid on February 16th. If you want to pull the plug on it, tell me now, and the project will be delayed a year.
Would we still be in line for the federal money?
Or what?
Well, we have to wait till, if we decide to do it a year from now, would we get
Will
the
the money
matching
be there?
money? Or we'd
I
have to
don't
wait till
know.
2020,
Maybe.
maybe?
But I think that's always a possibility. I mean, every time we apply, there's a possibility that we would not get approved, right? I mean, I don't think this is I would assume that it's not now or 5 years from now. So,
But what you're wanting to hold off on, you don't know if it's an eligible project.
And you don't know that right now either without looking into it, is what you're saying.
I don't know what you want to do with
Right,
the Third Street Bridge.
Right. Nor do we. I'm guessing.
not without looking at the WHKS report that we should have next session, is that?
Right.
yeah.
So the February 16th letting, that's a state mandated deadline, is that correct?
You have to identify the letting date 3 months ahead of the letting.
Okay. I mean, I kind of understand where Dave's coming from. On the other hand, I don't know that we're in a position to just put a screeching halt to everything until we know. We've struggled with this whole Green Bridge thing for a long time, and I'm hoping we'll be more efficient about making decisions about it. But I guess I don't know where we're headed quite yet with that, and so to just say, no, we're not going to move ahead on any other projects, that would seem to make some kind of sense without giving up on our process with the Green Bridge. I don't know if that's prudent to do either.
Mike, during one of the meetings that we had what's the other engineering, the first engineering firm we had to look at this?
BJ Engineering.
BJ Engineering, correct. You laid out the whole schedule-wise of how this project would evolve, the Green Bridge project, how that would evolve from a time frame. If you want it to be done in the summer of 2017, you backed that up, and you did a really good job, I thought, during that meeting, and how that all backed up on when it needed to be let and when, the engineering costs, engineering time frame, all of that. I mean, best case, if we get a plan from WHKS, when are we looking at actually doing any actual work on the Green Bridge?
Probably 2017.
2017.
Again, it depends on what it is that you want to do. It might be such that work could be done during next winter, but it depends on what the plan is going to be.
During that time now, is there going to be more? You obviously don't know. You told us that. Is there going to be more lost funds available? In your opinion, do you think there may be, or if it would qualify for that money?
Through the capital improvement planning that we've done, we've mapped out projects for the next several years. If you want to delay or cancel those projects in order to redirect funds to the Third Street Bridge, that can certainly be done.
I guess that's my point is, are we going to not do the 16th Street project? And we're looking at spending money on the 3rd Street Bridge in 2017 for the actual repairs. Are we giving money up that could be used? I mean, you can't bank that. It has to be spent during this year, right?
I don't know if the federal dollars that have been by the region set aside and allocated for 16th Street are transferable to the bridge. If that's what you want to do, I can certainly investigate that, but I don't know if that's a possibility.
But you don't know if we could actually spend those dollars in 2017.
If they are transferable,
Right. Let's just assume they're transferable.
Again, this has to be also voted on and agreed by the members of the Regional Transportation Authority. So even if they are eligible, the Regional Transportation Authority could deny our request.
Or we could get our report back from WHKS, come up with a completely new project, apply for these funds on a separate project. They could vote on it, and we could get more money for that. Is there still time for that?
We would have to request a reallocation of these funds from this project to the 3rd Street Bridge project.
But I think what Dan's asking is, are there other funding deadlines where additional funding could be requested if we went ahead with this?
There's the $1 million in urban bridge replacement funds out there that Waverly has been eligible for probably the past 12 years. And every year we turn it down because those bridge funds really aren't going to be eligible to repair the bridge.
They're only eligible for reconstruction.
Right, and that's, I think, the same situation that we're going to find these funds in. If they are transferable and talk about an eligible project, I don't think that replacing some stringers and floor beams are going to be considered an eligible project.
I'm leaning toward saying that, it looks like we're roughly halfway through this process, more or less. We have an application in. Not to take anything away from the Green Bridge, we have to keep moving ahead on that, but I guess I would favor moving ahead with this and as quickly as possible deciding what we're going to do about the Green Bridge and then start doing the financial planning and transference and banking, holding back, or maybe, replanning the projects that you have on the books for the next several years. We'll have to take a good hard look at those once we know what it is that we want to do with the Green Bridge.
Okay, let's go to a motion that we can further discuss as a council. Thank you, Mike.
I'll move Resolution 1601 approving the Iowa Northern Regional Transportation Authority Surface Transportation Programming Agreement for the 16th Street Southwest Reconstruction Project.
Second, please.
Second.
Motion seconded. Council discussion.
Again, I can understand the questioning. I guess I see this as more than likely two different funding streams, so I don't know that they're interchangeable. Plus, dropping out of line, since we do share this bucket of money with other communities, to arbitrarily say we'd be put back in the front of the line, I think is asking a little much if we'd ask for it to be reappropriated. So I think there's plenty of opportunities to look at projects that aren't as far along and delaying or reshaping them if we choose to move forward on the 3rd Street Bridge. My tendency is to move this forward and
David, do you want to weigh in back?
Yeah, I understand. I understand that. I guess I'm probably, in my mind, we need to ensure that the urgency for the Green Bridge is there. The life isn't going on as usual. I'm not sure how far along this project really is. So I'm getting emails from people saying, not understanding why I would be considering new projects while we've got the Green Bridge closed. So I guess that's where this is coming from. So Edie makes a good point. Maybe, if this is far enough along, which I'm not so sure that it is. I don't know if any funds have been expended. I guess I'm not convinced there's necessarily a need that this would be a priority. But in the future, we need to take a hard look at other budget items, to the point where, we basically put the brakes on until the Green Bridge is done, because that should have been prioritized ahead of other projects that we're working on today. So.
Well, just to clarify, I think, certainly there isn't any work that's been done yet, but I guess I'm just looking at the application processes that are involved and don't only affect, our staff, which is probably plenty of time and effort that's been put into it already, but then also our relationship with other entities who would be funding partners.
Pro Tem?
The construction documents are been prepared and the engineering is done on this project, correct? So we have expended money on the project, and it's to the point of bid letting, so we're in the last mile here as far as our work on the project.
I have a question just for my own information. Maybe Mike is the person, maybe somebody else can answer. How much does the city generate in local option sales tax in a year? And given the project we're talking about now, somebody's going to show it to me, but if I get an oral answer, then the people at home will know too. And then secondly, does it accumulate? And if it does, how much is left after we do this project?
So we generate about $1 million a year in local option sales tax, of which a good portion of it is being utilized to pay off the money we borrowed for the fire station. We generate in the neighborhood of, I want to say, $300,000 to $400,000 a year that is available for street projects. We had been needing to utilize about $125,000 per year for doing seal coating. Due to the increase in the Iowa fuel tax, we no longer need to do that. So that money remains and is available. We are also utilizing local option sales tax to finance the purchase of emergency response vehicles. Police vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks. That is something more recently that is being done. The local option sales tax expires in fiscal year 18-19 and will need to be brought up for a public vote again. This coming fiscal year, 16-17, I believe, is when the intent is to have a vote. Is that correct, Carla?
Yes.
So the council in this coming year is going to have some discussion on if it is renewed, how are those funds utilized and prioritized?
Right, just to add a little bit to the numbers on that, looking at the budget book that we've got for this year, we were estimating about a little over $1 million in revenue, with about $380,000, a little over that, going to the fire station and truck bonds, and about $55,000 going for the ambulance. So about 45% of what we took in for lost was going into those two projects. We had about $80,000 budgeted for the Second Avenue reconstruction that we did this summer, or last summer. About $250,000 went to the Second Street reconstruction. So there's another third of the money. And then we had about 35,000 that went to the planning for this project. Looking at what's projected out is the 200,000, 205,000 that's in our document for next year, for this project, for the next budget. And then the next project in line looks like Cedar Lane is the one that's coming up with about 35,000 in this coming budget for planning, and then the 17-18 budget is the big chunk of about 700,000 towards that for reconstruction, but that would be a much larger chunk to hold back on potentially if we're looking at holding back some money from lost. And again, it's a matter of that $200,000 of federal aid. Would we be able to get that back towards the bridge, or is that going to put us, where do we line up and fall in line for those funds versus right now we've got it approved for this project? So I understand the concerns about making sure we're not going too fast with other things when we've got this other project in mind, but this is one that's already lined up and ready to go. And as you know, as we were in the middle of approving this budget last year when the Green Bridge was shut down, so it was kind of a middle. You know, we didn't know any of the costs at that time while we were trying to approve the budget then. We'll have that opportunity this year to look at the budget for next year to say, okay, let's hold back on some of those things. And
Final comments before we vote? Public input?
Okay, one of those.
Chris Steindorf, Waverly, Iowa. I promised I wouldn't talk anymore, but
Can you state your address for the record?
2407 First Avenue Northwest. I used to live in that area up to about 2 years ago. I personally am in favor of that. We just did half of it about a year and a half ago. I had people at that time ask me, when are you going to finish the rest of it? While the Green Bridge is important, and I know you guys are going to continue to move forward on that, I don't think we should ignore some of our other infrastructure. Some of the bigger streets. If this was a small street with a couple of houses on it, I could understand, but it's a pretty busy street. That's just my opinion. So, thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Other public input before we roll call vote? Michael, you okay? Roll call vote, please.
Kangas.
yes.
Scher.
Yes.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Lampy.
Yes.
Waldstein.
Yes.
Resnichek.
Yes.
Resolution 16-01, unanimously approved. Regular business item number 2 is to set a public hearing date for this 16th Street reconstruction. Motion, please.
I'll move to set the public hearing date to review project plan specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost for the 16th Street Southwest reconstruction 2016 for January 18th, 2016 at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of City Hall.
Second, please.
Second.
Motion seconded. Council discussion. Public input. Roll call vote.
And that does not need a roll call vote. That's not a resolution.
All,
That's how we had it, but it's not.
yeah, okay, that's fine. All in favor signify with yes.
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 Opposed with no. Unanimously approved. Regular business item number 3 is to approve the final plat and plans for the Prairie Park Second Edition. For the public, there's an area just north of the Murphy Edition, which is probably a little bit more well-known. City engineer, do you see this as pretty straightforward? Is there anything that we need to be briefed on?
I think it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
This would be 7 lots up in the northeast part of town.
Okay. A formal motion would be in order then.
I'll move resolution 16-02 2, approving the final plat, construction plans, performance and maintenance guarantee for Prairie Park, second edition.
Second, please.
Second.
Motion second. Council discussion. Public input. Roll call vote.
Scherer,
Yes.
Waldstein,
Yes.
Kangas,
Yes.
Resnick,
Yes.
Lampy,
Yes.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Resolution 16-02 is unanimously approved. Regular business item number 4 is to reduce setback footage on decks, steps, and windowsills to allow more construction flexibility. This comes to us with both Board of Adjustments encouragement and then planning and zoning encouragement. Let me ask our Economic Development Director, Bill, for the public, what are the setback reductions that we're talking about here?
Well, we're not talking about reductions. We're talking about allowing steps and decks and window wells to encroach into the normal setback for a structure.
Okay.
And this would happen in certain situations where, especially on corner lots, where decks would have to be farther away from the adjoining property than they would if they were just in a backyard. So when Ben was researching this, he discovered that there was these requirements that these exceptions in some other areas that he looked at that would work well for those situations where the house is there and you want to just have a window well or front steps or the rear deck that isn't covered. Extend into that up to a maximum 5 feet. So I think it was just a response to certain situations that have come up over the last few years, and he was encouraged by the Board of Adjustments to look at this, and has had a couple situations I know as far as front steps and the rear deck that have occurred here in the city of Waverly. So we think this is a reasonable accommodation to allow for those situations.
Okay,
And the deck situation in the back, it actually came up that somebody had a deck for many years, and then they tore it out and wanted to get a building permit to put one back in the same exact spot, and they couldn't do it because of the rules. And so this was just a kind of a response to that situation.
Okay. A motion, please.
Approval of the first reading of ordinance 1009 and ordinance amending chapter 100 of the Waverly Municipal Code, adding provisions for setbacks on decks, steps, and window wells.
Second, please.
Second.
Motion second. Council discussion. See what happens when planning and zoning puts their stamp of approval? It's a piece of cake. Public input. A roll call vote.
McKenzie,
Yes.
Scherer,
Yes.
Waldstein,
Yes.
Kangas,
Yes.
Resnick,
Yes.
Lampy.
Yes.
First reading of ordinance 1009, unanimously approved. Regular business item number 5 is an ordinance amendment to reduce from 200 to 75 feet the fuel storage setback between M1, M2 businesses and residential property. A formal motion, please.
I'll move the third and final reading of ordinance 1007, an ordinance amending chapter 100 of the Waverly Municipal Code, providing for fuel storage tank setbacks of 75 feet in light industrial M1 and heavy industrial M2.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion second. Council discussion. We're far along the line here. Thank you. Public input. Roll call vote, please.
Lampy,
Yes.
McKenzie,
Yes.
Scherer,
Yes.
Waldstein,
Yes.
Kangas,
Yes.
Resnick.
Resolution 1007 is finally approved. Rental ordinance procedure review. We've been discussing this a little bit. City Economic Development Director, this is the rental, this is the procedure that went into effect in July 1st, I think, something like that. And we did, we haven't had too much activity on this, I don't think, but we had one where we tried to respond to a need that went to, this is one with the mold.
Well, let me go ahead and just give you a background on it. There were some concerns raised by landlords in December, and regarding one particular investigation. And just to tell you that, I think since we've been in force in July, I think we've had 5 complaints or 6 that have been investigated and resolved without any enforcement action. And
Complaints coming from tenants?
From tenants.
Yeah.
Yeah. And generally speaking, they haven't been a pattern of easy to pattern. I mean, they've just been different ones, different things that have been raised. Ben's kind of getting his feet wet with this, trying to figure out how the best method of is to explore these types of complaints and how to raise the issue. There was a particular incident that occurred most recently that I think that the landlords would like to discuss with us, and we're willing to do that. I did get back to I did respond to one of the landlords and was waiting for a response, and then I got something from Mr. Lampy, so that was fine. And we're willing to sit down. We're willing to talk about what the best way to approach these are. I think it's something that's very difficult to codify or to put regulations about how you do it. I think it's an administrative type of discussion that staff needs to have with the new city administrator. I do think it's one of those things that not everybody's always going to be happy about exactly how you do things. We created a rental code that we thought was going to be effective, that would be enforced when needed, but not be onerous in requiring annual inspections or even biannual or triannual inspections. And we also wanted to be complaint-driven, but being complaint-driven means we've never seen properties. And so if you have a complaint, many times you just want to see what the complaint is, or you want to see what the deal is. So that was Ben's initial response, rather than call in an inspection of the property when he had a complaint, was to say, why don't I just go look at it? So that's sort of how he's been doing it so far, and it's worked out fairly well. We're willing to meet again with members of council or the landlords again to talk about how that works, and I think that would be a good way to sit down with them and sit down with the members of the council and say, this is how we expect to do it, but every case is really different. Every complaint is different. I don't know that we can set rules. We've been thinking about this for quite a few weeks now, and trying to set a rule as to how we're handling every investigation or every response to a person who's complaining. We're just trying to do the best we can and learn how to get along with this rental code and do the best we can without being too. We want to protect health and safety of tenants, but we also want to respect the rights and the procedural rights of the landlords and giving them opportunities to respond to complaints. And we think we've tried to do so far, and we're still willing to learn.
Sure. Sounds very good. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, have you made the offer to meet with the landlords group?
I did actually when I responded in December, and I didn't hear from the landlord that I was corresponding with directly. I just said I'm willing to meet. I did do a fairly long explanation. I think you saw a copy of that.
Yeah.
And said I'm willing to meet at any time. So, and the next response I got was Mr. Lampy.
Mr. Lampy, would you like to weigh in here?
Well, I guess the concerns that have been raised by the Landlord Association is that, the city acting on a complaint, we have no problem with, coming in and doing an inspection. And I know that, the person that you were doesn't have a problem with doing the inspection if there's a complaint. The whole issue was the transparency and letting the landlord, the property owner, know that there actually was a complaint. If the complaint occurred, I think the property owner, you should verify with the property owner first that, okay, are you aware of the situation? I personally have had a situation where I had a tenant that complained about something, of the operation of it, but was directly responsible for that in operation. So unless we have communication between staff, the landlord, and the tenant, all working as a group to resolve these, I think that's the only way that we can really go forward with this, my opinion.
Well, and the situation that we're talking about, Ben got the call from the tenant, and the tenant says, come down and look at it, and see if I'm right or wrong, or see if I'm all wet. And, Ben's response was, well, gee, I'll just go look at it, and if I see anything, I'll get a hold of the landlord, which is what he did.
Which I just feel that, the city's setting themselves up for maybe some liability as well, saying, okay, I went in there and I looked at that and everything's fine. Well, you're not letting the landlord know that you're even in there inspecting.
Well, we certainly do that after the fact if we go to the property first.
And that's what I'm saying, is that you should tell the landlord and have him be able to be there and take part in the inspection. I think that's only fair.
Well, we can certainly talk about that. I think
Right,
that's something
and
we can
that's
discuss.
all we're asking, I guess,
Sure.
from that respect.
Sure.
I would suggest that maybe then just, if you're, I don't remember your email exactly, but if it's articulated in the way that you just said it, maybe a more concrete suggested meeting, so that you can actually sit down, staff and the landlord group can actually sit down and talk through some of this. And I think it would be the appropriate gesture for city staff to take that initiative and say, we want to hear what you have to say, and we've got ideas about this too, and let's find a time where we can meet and talk it through.
And I think, and we're willing to do this, and I think it will happen. There are going to be situations that come up, though, where a tenant does make a complaint and say, I want you to take a look at it and see if but I don't want to tell the landlord unless you tell me it's something. If it's nothing, sometimes they feel like
They'll get in trouble,
they'll get in trouble, they get kicked out or whatever. And so that's the feeling I get that he has gotten from an occasional tenant that will call and say, but if it's nothing that you can do anything about, I don't want you to tell the landlord that I talked to you. And so that's the risk-free run in those situations, because then the tenants won't really want to make any complaints if it's going to be automatically communicated at the same time directly to the landlord. We're really talking about making a very preliminary, I don't even want to call it an inspection. I would just call it a visit, an investigation, as much as Ben can do. And if we felt that there was a need for further investigation, either we could hire the county inspector, as we've been authorized to do, and have them do a full inspection of the property, and then just go with the results that come from that inspection. Or we can continue to have Ben take a look at it and say, well, gee, it does look like maybe something here, and then not even move the inspection first, but get the landlord involved. And that's what we did in this situation. And the landlord's the one that hired the experts to check on what the problem is. I know it's not perfect because every situation is going to be different. And so the next time it comes up, you may have a different feeling about it. Our preference is to talk to and involve the landlords from the very beginning. And I think most of those complaints, we have done that. The landlord has been contacted. The landlord is involved in addressing it. And sometimes we say to the tenant, there really isn't a big deal, and maybe you caused it, but you can talk to the landlord and we'll help you do that. And we've done that. So we're just trying to make it work. We're not trying to be too strict about getting an inspection done. And that was the thing we were trying to avoid, is that cost of a formal inspection by our county building inspectors. So we'll still work with them. We'll sit down with them.
In the situation where you have a lease involved, that's for the joint protection of both the landlord and the tenant. And when you as staff go into a building on the advisement of the tenant, saying that I think there's something wrong here, I'm having a hard time, but I think there's something wrong. You're assuming that the tenant is correct, or that there's something wrong there. You're not even giving the landlord a chance to counteract, or not counteract, but to have a say in the situation at all. You're kind of taking sides as far as we're.
I don't know that we do that, because if we go into the property, we're going to look at it and say, well, how'd this happen? And why did it happen? And sometimes we find out, I guess at least in one situation, that it was really the tenant's fault of what they were complaining about. And so when we called the landlord and talked to them, we said, basically, it's an issue, but we're not telling you have to pay for it, because maybe the tenant should pay for it because it was caused by them. And so we addressed the complaint that way. We really didn't take a side of the tenant in that situation, because we actually made the finding that it probably was the tenant's problem.
I'm just saying that the relationship between the tenant and the landlord can be kind of dynamic. I don't know how much experience you have with that. I did quite a bit. It's not something that you necessarily want to get involved in. A lot of times, if you get everybody, all the parties involved together, talk about it, then you have no liability, or you're not being viewed as taking sides, I guess is what I'm saying.
But we have a rental code that we're supposed to enforce, and there's a reason that we put it in
Then we need to
enacted
get
that.
the landlord involved, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and
From
believe
the
me,
beginning, I
we're
guess
not going
is
to do
my
any
point.
formal action until we get the landlord involved. And it's going to be long, that's going to be way down the road before we get any enforcement action. It's going to be either a refusal to allow
But
us.
as a city staff doing a visit, I think that's a formal action.
Yeah, I think just from the outside looking in, I don't have rental properties, but just from a business owner tenant relationship, I would rather keep that relationship with the business owner. And the city, if things don't go well, the city can maybe come in after the fact and enforce the code that's been developed. But my concern is in very layman terms, creating a police state where if I'm renting a property, I know I can call the city hotline and they're going to come. I guess I would like to avoid that, and I think we might create that unintentionally, where the whole reason for the code was to ensure the safety of our properties and make sure that they're up to the same standard. And my concern is if we're in any way getting in the middle of the relationship between a tenant and a landlord, we're doing it wrong. We need to change it. I mean, from my standpoint, if I had a rental property and I found out, I wouldn't have any concerns with the tenant. But if I found out that city people were coming in and say, yeah, we're going to talk about this, we're going to do this, and we're not going to enforce anything yet, and they've already taken formal action by coming, whether indirectly, not legally obviously, but indirectly, things have been put in motion, and I guess personally I would want to avoid that.
If we have created a rental code that is not inspection driven, because we take everybody at their face and say, you're telling us that your unit is not a danger to health and safety, and the only way we know if it's not is by a complaint, and you're telling us we're not supposed to act on that complaint, I don't know how we can move forward with a complaint and investigating that complaint if we have to go to the landlord. We may not get the cooperation of the landlord. We may, but we may not. We also may get the tenant kicked out before we even get a chance to get in the property. What we're trying to do is really just find out if they have any credibility. Sometimes the tenant doesn't have any credibility, and we find that out very quickly by visiting them. And they're the ones inviting us into their space that they have rented and that they possess and are living in. This hasn't happened very often, and many times I don't think it will happen very often. And when it does, I think we should take the tenant's complaints seriously, at least to the point of face value until we find out for sure. And if we find out that it's not a problem, we say, you don't have a complaint. You don't have a valid complaint. And I don't think a simple visit to the premises invited by the tenant is really overreaching in that situation. I think it's responding to that tenant. Tenant's not going to think we care if we won't even go without letting the landlord be present.
Do we know anything about what other places do? Other cities?
There's a variety. There's some of them that won't, because their personnel are actually inspectors, so they will only do it if they give notice. And I think Council Bluffs was one of those that actually had a provision like that. So we can do that.
What about complaint-driven? Do we know any cities that have a similar code to the one we developed?
No.
Okay.
And I think most cities would respond to complaints, and they would respond to the tenant. They won't do a formal inspection because you give notice of a formal inspection. Again, we can skip that stage, but if we do skip that stage, it's going to be more formal inspections that are requested. And those are the ones that we have to pay for through the county and that we collect back from the landlord.
Maybe help me clarify a little bit. I appreciated your response to the landlord that brought this forward, but in reading it, I wasn't really sure if the landlord that had the occupancy that was at question, where are they in this mix? Did they approach you and say, this is broken, fix it? Did they?
No, what the tenant came to, I called Ben and asked about this and was actually trying to explain what they were talking about and said, why don't you just come over and I'll show you? And that's how it precipitated it. And then when he went there, he had some concerns about the issues that were raised by the tenant. And so when he had those concerns, he went to the landlord then directly and said, these are the concerns I have based on what I've seen now. And not knowing the relationship, we didn't get into what the relationship was between the landlord and tenant, what issues they've had in the past. We were looking purely at the conditions. What did we see, smell, hear?
They didn't ask the question very well. The landlord in question, how did they feel the process worked?
Well, they were unhappy with the process because they had to spend some money on inspection by their own experts. There was a mold issue, so they got a mold mitigation person to do an inspection. There was some basement wall support issues, so they got somebody to inspect that. I think Ben's suggestion was that they do that to make sure that there wasn't any problems with those two things. And that's, I think, by no means was it mandatory or required of them.
How would a process along the lines that Dan just outlined, how would that have changed this particular case, anything in the outcome?
Probably not, because I think the landlord would have probably said, sure, you can come over and take a look. And that would have probably been the same result because he would have seen the same things. And the landlord probably wouldn't have still been able to respond to those because it wasn't known. It wasn't known by somebody that wasn't an expert in that field.
And would he still have had the same expense for the verification or the inspections for mold and for the structural?
If the landlord chose to like they did, to get the mold mitigation person to inspect and the structural support, the same expenses would have been incurred. I mean, we didn't know whether there were any problems with the structural. It seemed that there may have been, and that there seemed to be a mold issue because of the smell and the odor and that kind of thing. And it was a suggestion that they go ahead and do something to see if there was any problems.
And then there was mold issues.
Let's say
in the new furnace.
Yes, there was.
Yeah, I think that the compromise is that the landlord needs to be respected, and I think you did. But Dan would say, but make every effort where you can. And then if there's an extenuating, I hate to make a rule because there'll be extenuating circumstances when you have a landlord that's just plain not going to cooperate. Yeah. And is just not thinking of the tenant. We have to think of the tenant's needs and safety too. And so I think to nudge it towards Dan's position, but have a non-rule so that when we need to just make an exception and for the safety and for the process, so we just go ahead.
Chuck, I think that's the easy part. I mean, the easy part is to say when somebody's not cooperating that we have to do something more formal. I think after hearing the responses and the concerns, I think we'll look at these differently. We'll probably make more effort to involve landlords from the very beginning because I think we appreciate those concerns.
Sure.
There are going to be tenants that say, well, if you're going to tell the landlord, then forget it. I don't want to take a chance of losing my place. And we either risk not going over and taking a look ourselves or that tenant just lives with whatever's there.
Yeah.
And that's the few situations that are going to come up that way. And it may not be very many.
We're using in different words, the same thought. Before we wrap up, Dan, Dave, you want to say something first, and then Dan?
Yeah, I think it would be important still to bring the. And I guess I made the request to put it on the agenda just so we could have a discussion, so we can get a handle. I wanted to, as the landlords work together with the city to put this together, I wanted to help address the issue with them as soon as possible. And I guess I would still I think Dan recommended that you get together with the landlords. I think we should definitely do that and tackle this and work out a solution that works for the landlords and the tenants. In my mind, I think if it was me, I would want a pretty hard, fast process where if a tenant has an issue, he goes to the landlord. Landlord doesn't respond, maybe then he goes to the city or something like that. But that link has to be to the landlord first. I think something needs to be worked out, and I think that's the path that they were on, to meet with the landlords and work that out.
Just to respond to that, though, we do make sure that they have been to the landlord first. We won't go there if they haven't addressed this issue with the landlord. At least told us they have.
Doesn't sound like some of these examples went that way, but so maybe just.
No, everyone went that way. As far as we asked the tenant whether they've already contacted the landlord, and we asked them to do that first, to address those complaints first.
Well, maybe you could have that meeting that we talked about initially, which apparently came as a suggestion from the landlords and from Dan, and maybe just bring us up to speed about where that went, and then see if we need to be involved any further or not. I think initially I'd rather have staff and the landlords group try to work it out and then see where that goes.
We're glad to do it. We worked with them a lot with the crafting of that code. So, glad to
Dan,
work with them.
last word, then we'll move on.
I just think you're absolutely right. I think you need to go tell the tenant when the complaint comes in, have you tried to resolve this issue with the landlord? Because I think that's what the rental code pretty much wants to do to begin with. If they say that they can't do it, just have them tell them, we're going to have to get the landlord involved. We're going to have to come together. That's when we as a city need to get involved in it. If the landlord is not responsive, most of the times I think if the landlord is notified, I know from my experience, if I have someone that's complaining, I usually respond. Not usually, always. If you have the landlords that do not respond and do not want to take care of the issues, that's when the city needs to get involved, and that's how the rental code kind of spells it out as well. So I think it's an important piece that we need to involve the landlords.
Sure.
In my opinion,
We will.
Okay, thank you. Good discussion. Mayoral appointments. I'd like to make 2 appointments tonight to commissions and boards. I'd like to put Brad Gade on the Golf Commission, and I'd like to appoint Emily Nyendorf, somebody's sister, to the Utility Commission. Is there a motion?
Move approval.
Second, please.
Second. That was the second.
There's a second. This is a voice vote. All in favor signify with yes.
Yes.
Opposed with no. We are very thankful for public service and for Brad to step forward. He's got a nice relationship with a golf country club already, so that'll be good. And Emily will be outstanding on the Utility Commission. Also, I'd like to appoint Tim Cagnes as Mayor Pro Temp for another year. I think this takes. Am I out of order? Okay, that's why we got a city clerk.
all that on the 18th.
I was aware of that, but then I was told we had to do it on the first.
We don't
We-
have it on the agenda to do that.
Code says the first meeting in January.
We never have.
Okay, unless somebody's objecting, we can wait till the 18th, I guess, since it's not on the agenda. Anybody want to
Is it
react?
too late to add it to the agenda now?
Yes.
Okay.
I think he may want a little more time to campaign.
You passed the test.
Okay, we know the cat's out of the bag, so we know what the drama will be on the 18th. Okay, we'll just wait then, unless there's an objection. Regular business item number 8 is a housing grant discussion. This goes back to Bremer Court and Ombudsman's response to Ida. They had some conflict. I'm going to turn it over to Dave and Dan.
Yeah, the only reason I guess I asked, this was made available, and the only reason I asked to have it on the agenda is it really kind of closes the loop on the ombudsman. I know there's just some discussion on the original letter that it was preliminary, and from Jason Pullman's standpoint, it was not preliminary, but IEDA had an opportunity to respond. So this was basically a response to IEDA, but this was actually from the actual ombudsman. So, and they, of course, they withheld Jason's points, and I think from this, there's some things that we can learn from this is to ensure that we're following the process. I think this got quite messy to the point where, we actually had some state departments that got involved and did some significant investigation and, found that we weren't following the process and so forth. So I think we can learn something from this and move forward and for the next one. And I can put my rah-rah in for the housing strategy again. All
right.
So this is online if you'd like to read through it. Basically, it kind of follows the same format as the first letter. It goes, the 4 points of how it happened, the resolution of support, the letter, the local match, and everything else, and it basically goes detail by detail. So just close the loop on that situation to eliminate any confusion.
Thank you, David. Regular business item number 9 is a discussion of the snow removal and downtown parking. This came from Dan McKenzie.
Yeah, I had a few phone calls from downtown business owners as well as general public, and I just wanted an opportunity, I guess, for public work staff to kind of fill us in on the snow event. And in talking to some of the parties, it became fairly obvious that maybe the communication loop had not been completed with folks that have upper story rentals as well as downtown businesses as far as our change to 24-hour parking, that type of thing. So I thought,
Brian,
again, I think
Sullivan.
staff maybe were called on the carpet by a few people for not getting streets clean, those type of things. But just the weekend or the holiday week and extra heavy snow and some other things going on were more the root cause than not trying to get around and get snow taken care of. And I'll be quiet and let Brian take over.
Thanks, Brian.
Generally, it was a 10-plus inch snowfall with wind starting from one direction and then changing towards the end. So we were dealing with 2 to 4 foot snow drifts out there. It started approximately about 7:30 on Monday morning, and the general part of it ended about 9:30 that night. We still had some, about a half inch. It fell between 9:30 and 1:30 that into Tuesday morning. Generally, we had a crew out, about 5. The ones that we could, we had about 5 people out during the day on Monday trying to keep the snow routes open and any hill areas that become tough travel areas. Generally, at about 4, I send everybody home except for 2 operators to try to keep the snow routes open and let the rest of the staff go get some sleep, knowing that they'd probably be out between midnight and 2 o'clock in the morning. About 9:30, sent one of the gentlemen home so he can get some sleep, and they kept another staff on hand just for emergency calls that may come in, whether it's from the ambulance or fire department. I did have the fire chief call me earlier in the day to ask if we were going to have somebody available just in case there was an emergency call that came out. Generally, it was a tough storm to keep stuff open. We were running snow routes throughout the night, and within 20 to 30 minutes after we'd have one open, it would fill back in. For some reason, this one was a lot tougher to deal with. And generally, what we try to do from the end of a storm is try to have everything opened up within 12 hours. It took us a little bit longer this time due to the amount of snow, and it seemed like some of our trucks had a tough time getting around. So with that, I thought the staff did a very good job. You have to realize over half of my staff is not just street department for snow removal. They have other jobs that they have to do, solid waste, line maintenance, and mechanics. So I have to look at how to stage them so that they are fresh, in a way fresh for their duties the next day, because I can't have people that are tired trying to run garbage trucks, work on vehicles. So we have to sort of stage it so that they can also get some sleep and then be able to come in, plow what they can, and then we send them on to their other jobs. With some of them also, that week got started at a little before midnight on Sunday night due to the biosolids spill. We had some guys in trying to do some damming for that project. So the week got started early for some, and then it was also a double route day on that Monday for the garbage crew. So as I said, I think the staff did a very good job dealing with all situations. Dealing with the parking lot, we knew going into this that with the 24-hour parking allowed at any spot in the parking lot, that would cause us some problems with the snow removal. Generally, for the most part, the bigger parking lots aren't a problem. It's the smaller ones trying to find places to put the snow, especially with a 10-inch snowfall. That makes for difficult to try to find an area big enough to make the pile. And with the one parking lot, it ended up, and we will have some discussions on that, it dealt with the flow of the parking lot itself, because it ended up blocking one of the entrances to that, so it wasn't a full flow through around. You could still come in from the entrance. This has to do with the Mauer Ice Center parking lot. You could come in off of the 2nd Street northeast one, and then you could drive through, but it ended up with the entrance off of 3rd Street that created a problem. So, and usually with the parking lots, we're back in there within 1 or 2 days after the storm and start hauling out the piles. So, any questions?
Again, I think the one thing we may need to help communicate is the change of 24 hours, and that's for the whole lot. I think there were some tenants, upper story tenants, that felt they traditionally parked in the north row, and if they parked anywhere else, they were going to get a ticket, that type of thing. So I know during the discussion of going to the 24-hour, we talked about having even odd days as far as where you parked in the parking lot to allow for snow removal. I'm thinking it's communicating with those folks, letting them know once half the lot's cleared, please move over there so the other half can be cleared and those type of things. And I don't know if that's our responsibility or if we can tap into the chamber or a combination of the two. And I'll look to Carla here to kind of help us out.
And I'm actually going to defer that to the city attorney.
Well, it's interesting.
That's
We talked about this risk of where we end up with cars that stay there and then they got the snow around them and you can't get the whole thing clean because you don't get it doesn't empty out at night. And so that's what they're running into. And we will try to come up with different solutions this year if we can. We'll take suggestions from the business owners, from the people who live there, come up with a odd even within the lot, like at night, maybe this is the odd day and this is the even. I don't know if that would work to somehow be able to clean one side and then everybody move to the other side type of thing. As it gets worse with the traffic and the parking, we'll have to consider other options.
But what about, just like the streets? What if there was just, there were sections that were identified as snow emergency that had to be cleared under, that everybody would just know those have to be cleared under those conditions?
We could have corners where they could store the snow. That would be helpful because I know that's one of the problems of having 3 or 4 spots that don't get used when there's snow coming, so they can have a space for that. We'll have to come up with ideas like that when we look back at what's happened and how we've done.
And generally, unless it's a 10-inch snowfall that we had, a snowstorm that we had, it's really not too much of a problem, because the smaller snowfalls, usually we can find a space to put it in, and then the flow continues through there. So, as I said, you got to look at the storm that happened, and that changes. Each storm has its different dynamics, and so you have to deal with that with each storm. So we'd like to think that, as I said, we tried to have everything open streetwise, especially within 12 hours. And I think that's what we do here is very good compared to some other cities and other areas of the state. That I'll put our snow removal up against anybody.
Brian said at the meeting today that the vendors that come to our town to deliver it to the businesses when there's a snowstorm know to come to Waverly first because we're going to be cleaner faster than most other places. So I think that says a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, well, thank you, Brian.
Again, there's just, I wanted Brian to have an opportunity to kind of set the stage for maybe why the snow removal didn't meet some people's expectations, and I appreciate you standing behind your crew because I know they're out there doing a great job, and it was just perfect storm, I guess, as far as everything going on in the community as well as the snow. So,
That said, they have, some of them have other duties that they have to do, so it's.
I think we're going to have to continue talking about downtown parking as more upper stories get rented, and how does somebody that live downtown have to move their vehicle every 24 hours if they're out of town for a week's vacation, those type of things.
It's generally, we'll come in and clean the parking lot, and as I said, there's a couple days before we get back in to clean. That gives the opportunity for those people to move to a spot that doesn't have any snow, and then when we're in there cleaning, if it gives us enough space, we can go in there and get what we can that may be left behind.
Then one last thing, I know there's been some questions about the hole in the driveway or the alleyway that's in behind Crawdaddy's and Tenenbaums in that area.
Yes, I had the Public Works office check into that last week. I noticed, unless they came in later on today, there was supposed to be a firm in today to start working on those, but late this afternoon I didn't see any activity there, so we will try to follow up, and because I know that is some of the frustration too, tied to that same parking lot. The business owners haven't been able to use that alley for I'll probably have to say a month or longer. And with the holes in there, it makes it tough for us to deal with the snow in the alley and also the garbage routes and the cardboard routes. So it would be nice if it be taken care of.
Well, thank you for making small government work and makes us all winners. Any last comments? David, you want to
I was going to say thank you while you're standing there, and thank you for everything you do. I was getting questions in my neighborhood about the trucks haven't gone, so I did my duty and sent the email, and Mike answered right back that it was kind of like all you had to do is say, stupid, we got 10 inches of snow, but the trucks came through, and he actually had to make 6 passes through my little neighborhood. And even the last pass, he couldn't get the blade to the ground. It was so deep. So appreciate what you guys are doing.
That's the other thing with the smaller snowfalls. It may take us 2 passes to get it out. With a larger snowfall, it takes more passes and it takes more time. So.
Yep. So we live in this wonderful environment. So we're going to have to deal with some snow. Or we get to deal with some snow.
Yeah, I would add that the same. I think we really do need to appreciate the work that the snow removal people do. The only complaint I would have is I wish they could find a way to vacuum the residue off the end of my driveway that they leave. But I realize if they did that, everybody else would want that too.
The one thing I tell people, if we haven't plowed their street and they want to clean their drive, leave some at the end. It's one of those things when we're plowing and we're making that last pass along the curb, you call it the path of least resistance. If that driveway is clean, that plow full of snow is going to empty out in that drive. So generally, if you can wait till we're done, you're not going to have quite as much snow in the end. The other thing that you can do is, I'll call it upstream from your driveway or the direction that the traffic would be coming from, is take your snow blower and make a pass right behind the curb, about 10 to 12 feet in front of your drive, so that when that plow does come along there that's full of snow, it'll empty into that area and not into your driveway.
I think that David's work.
I have the same problem, Mike. My house is kind of at a T, and so I get the truck coming off of the street coming towards my house, and that stuff ends up at the end of my driveway. So I get double.
Mayor, if I could, one last snow-related, my annual plea to adopt your fire hydrant. I know there are a few out there that are pretty well buried, and The guys at the fire station would appreciate you digging them out and making sure that we can see them and get to them as quickly as possible.
I was going to say, I think David's words were spoken on behalf of us all. But we appreciate the work. Before we go to the reports, we need to say that a very quiet presence has been felt throughout this entire meeting, as James Bronner, our city administrator-elect, is with us. Thank you, James, for sitting in and listening to all this interesting conversation. And it's great to have you with us, and we look forward to our crescendoing participation in the issues of Waverly. It's just a thrill, and you know how excited the whole town is for you and your family, and it should be exciting new chapters ahead for us, and it's good to have you with us. The monthly W report for November has been in hand. Any comments? Officially received. The Golf Commission minutes for December 8th. We have any comments? Officially received. Economic Development Commission minutes from December 8th. Any comments?
Mayor, I just asked the council to make sure they take a look at that. Part of it was going through a SWOT analysis, and I think there's some good feedback there for the group to digest as we look at economic development in the community. And
thank you. Staff comments. Mike.
So last Thursday afternoon, I promised an update on our mishap at the wastewater treatment facility. So we had a pipe break in a pump house that resulted in that pump house being flooded and discharging biosolids into a detention basin and drainage way west and north of the facility. So the drainage swale that was impacted went across the soccer complex and also impacted their parking lot. All the liquefied biosolids have been, in fact, cleaned up and addressed. The stuff that froze has been collected and stockpiled in the parking lot, and that will be removed tomorrow. The final remediation effort is to add hydrated lime to the impacted areas. This is kind of an added precautionary measure. It raises the pH and acts as a disinfectant. Come springtime, we'll do some seeding and restoration, but the area impacted has been confined to the detention basin immediately west of the facility and to the drainage swale that crosses the soccer complex.
Very good.
So come Wednesday afternoon, hopefully we will have put that part of it behind us. We will certainly have to do some repair work within that pump house. We are also looking at some remedies to reduce the opportunity for this happening again. That facility has been operational for the past 20 years, and it was significant, and we certainly don't want to repeat of this going forward. So I'll address any questions you have on that, and then I got one last item I'd like to touch upon.
Go ahead.
Okay. As Councilmember McKenzie indicated, the city encourages neighbors to adopt a fire hydrant to clear the snow from around it. We've got one other thing that can be very helpful, and that is to also adopt a storm intake out in the street. We average about 2 per block, so we have well over 1,000 storm intakes. Our gutter areas are right now full of snow. We've got some warm weather headed towards us by Thursday, and there may be a mixed bag of weather with that. Some forecast predictions have the chance for rain, some for sleet, some for snow. If it does come in the form of rain, that could compound some problems, because I know just driving around, I can't see the intakes.
And that means that there is an enhanced opportunity for those to become plugged and not drain very well. So what seems to work well is if you have a garden shovel or garden spade, and again, just try to scoop some of that snow away from that intake. Even if you can't get all the way down to it, what you remove can be very helpful because if we do get some melting, it usually will at that point find a path into the intake.
Thank you. May the public be listening, because that would be very, very helpful. Those storm sewers need to be open. If we get that rain coming on top of that snow, we're going to need help. Thank you. Finance Director, I think you've been negotiating some dates.
I don't know if I've been negotiating, but we, as directors, have been meeting, and we kind of put together a schedule to be able to certify the budget by March 15th. And just wondering what your thoughts might be on it, or
Say it one more time.
we put together a schedule to meet like you have in prior years for the budget. Department heads have put together their budget, and I am in the process of putting that together with the figures given. We did receive our valuation reports last Friday, so we did have growth, which is good. But I sent you all an email with a list of dates that we possibly could do the budget, and it appears maybe that there's discussion that February 1st council meeting wanted to be moved to February 8th.
Because of the caucuses, yeah.
Because of the caucuses, so that was one option of having one of the budget, the second meeting. So instead of doing it the 8th, possibly doing it Saturday, February 13th. So that means we would have the first meeting January 30th. That's a Saturday. The second one, February 13th, which is a Saturday.
Okay. Quick
Those
reactions?
are fine by me. I can only speak for myself. Those work for me.
Works? Okay, Dan?
Yeah, that's fine.
David? Me too.
We'll make it work.
Thank you, Jennifer. That was pretty good.
Thank
It was
you.
easier than you thought.
Piece
Had
of cake.
everybody coming.
Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
We also need a consensus on whether or not we would like to possibly put on the agenda for next time to move the first meeting in February to the 8th. So if everyone would like to do that, I'll put that on the agenda and we can formally make that motion. And
Yeah, I think Pro Temp has been pushing that too, right? I'm for that.
I just suggested it, just looking at the cross there, that I think that would be a good idea. I certainly would like to be able to attend.
I want to go to the caucuses too. So that would make a lot of sense. Anybody disagreeing with that? Okay. So that can be next meeting. Any other staff comments? City council comments? Let's go to this side first. Edie?
I don't have any comments, thank
Yeah.
you.
I don't think so.
I think it'd be good, Dan, to your point about the economic development meeting minutes and the SWOT analysis. I think it'd be good to go through that. Maybe if we could have someone come and go through that. There's some interesting comments here that'd be good to talk about. So,
Could we add that to our
maybe a
housing
work-
discussion
maybe a work
on the
study or area, something.
study session? And
Study session, yeah.
Thank you.
Sounds like a study session
Sounds good.
topic.
Dan?
Nope, I've had my opportunity already. So.
Mike?
Oh, just an observation. I was thinking about the fact that, except for the mayor, I'm the only person in the room that on the around the desk who's not gainfully employed, which means I'm retired. Which leads me to want to say that I'm really impressed that everybody else here is putting in their time to serve, because obviously you have other things to do. And I think the citizens probably appreciate that as well, even though they may never tell you. Although maybe now they will.
Pro Tem.
Thank you.
Tony Michael, it's good to have you a part of us. Any
so much
closing
for-
comments?
Nope, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, though.
None for the mayor. Motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn?
Second.
Second.
All in favor signify with yes.
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 Adjourned.